Welcome to a new episode of Advancing Consciousness series with Franco Di Nicola. This is a place where people can come to gain further insight and clarity as to what is going on and how we can shift things on a personal and global level, while also accessing higher levels of consciousness and awareness. We bring this series to you free of charge so that many are able to access this information. However, if you resonate with what Franco shares and you would like to support his work to get more content out, contributions are welcomed and greatly appreciated. A link is in the description and will be provided in the chat if you feel guided to do so. Also, we have many previous workshops, such as the most recent, Bringing Out the New You to Play in the New World, along with our membership program, Let's Talk About You, where like-minded people come together bi-weekly to talk about the topics requiring deeper understanding and clarity. All of these are available on Teachable, and we encourage you to check them out as they are great resources at very affordable prices to assist in better understanding this human experience. The Teachable link will also be provided in the chat and is also in the description. And lastly, don't forget to share. As more of us come together who are creating shifts in themselves, the more effective it will be to shift things globally. Thank you for joining us and being part of the change. Enjoy today's broadcast.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Advancing Consciousness series. This is the series that helps us remember, access, and expand our own consciousness so that we can be a very powerful instrument of change in our own life personally and our extended life and the world itself. So here we are, episode 21. It's hopefully it's only one part. We'll see how far it goes with something that we're going to be playing with today. So today we're going to be covering the ego and how it actually shapes our life and our world. Now, that was my original topic, and I wanted to talk about the ego, but it looks like a bunch of egos got together and they had a meeting. So they sent a kind of a memo to my ego saying, no, we can't talk about the ego because we don't want anyone to know how we actually function on the back end of our life. So we're going to have to find a new topic. So Kimberly, I don't know what topic we should talk about if ego is not going to be the direction we're going to go to today. But anyways, just kidding. Just getting things exciting here. All right. So the reason we've chosen ego is because it does play a huge role in our life. In fact, the ego has become such a powerful integrated experience and reference point in our own life and everything that's been unfolding on the planet that in most cases, unless it's right in our face where people say, well, they're egotistic or something of that nature, we don't realize how much of it is actually navigating our life, how much of it is shaping every part of it. A lot of times what happens is we think what we are thinking, feeling, experiencing, observing, how we're reacting, responding, engaging, and what we refer as ourself is really just the ego itself, not really so much ourselves. Now, this is why there's been a lot of focus of shifting ourselves from the mind to the heart, where we're actually tapping to our higher self and soul. And that way we're putting less emphasis, less input within the ego mind. I mean, the mind is a powerful computer and it does what it does in allowing us to have reality, to have what looks like solid, what allows us to have experiences, shapes, forms, and whatever else from just a field of energy, a field of consciousness, a field of pure essence that can be converted and utilized as form to have an experience, including our own physical body. So the mind is very powerful, and it does receive several inputs. It receives input from not only Gaia, it receives it through our body, it receives it through the human entity, our soul, and then of course that uses all of that to create certain forms of reality. And then the ego comes in. So the ego, what really is the ego? because a lot of people do not understand that. And I feel that if we understand how it works, what it is, and how it came about, and what role it's played up to this point in time, we have a better handle on how to utilize it until it no longer serves, which at this point in time is really not of service unless we're using it for some form of completion, because the ego can be also a tool to kind of bring up, as the observer, to bring up certain program stories and belief systems and so forth that we've integrated and utilized as part of our reference point and experience. So, what is the ego? When we're looking at it, the ego itself is a software, okay? I know I've talked about it before, but I'm going to go into it a little deeper. It's a software. It's a self-learning software. It's artificial intelligence. This particular software itself was not our original design. It was not part of our original design when we were completely redesigned, when we were actually put into place. And I'm referring to physical form. When we're talking about the human physical form, the operating systems with all the DNAs and everything else that made up this physical form as an expression did not have this particular software in place. This software was installed and then upgraded at different times starting 10,000 years ago. Prior to that, the first 5,000 years, it did not have that software. And the reason it didn't have that software, there was no purpose for the software. There was no purpose to have that as part of your operating system. Now, the ego itself, like I said, is artificial intelligence, so it is self-learning, and you'll notice how it learns, how it expands, not only from every other ego that it's interacting with because of the connections that are there, but it's also learning through you, and it's adopting and adapting and shaping and utilizing resources from yourself to create realities. Now, the question comes in, why was this installed 10,000 years ago, 10K years? Well, remember, in part of the other episodes that I've talked about is when we had an intervention that came about that adjusted our original operating system 10,000 years ago, where we had certain beings that had come onto the planet, introduced and put into place a different operating system to intensify this so-called planetary playground and physical form to create the polarities and so forth. So what was introduced at that point in time, we had an original matrix and an original operating system as a physicality. All the sentient beings responded to that connection, to that operating system from the organic matrix with our organic blueprint. And at that point, we had 12 of our DNAs all active, receiving and transmitting information, consciousness, and various codes and upgrades on a constant basis. So when the introduction was put into place, this inverted matrix was installed. The inverted matrix made everything backwards, which we're still living today. Now, the inverted matrix is no longer active, but we are still living in that inverted matrix programming system. So let's go back to the inverted matrix. So the inverted matrix was put in where everything went backwards. That created us to shift from organic 3D to an inverted 3D, and then the next stage was 2D. Now, the inverted matrix itself was not capable of shifting our reality enough to keep it intact. Because of the fact that we had active DNA within ourselves, and the fact there was a lot of communication, and also that we had established a certain amount of consciousness and experience within the 5,000 years which we kept reincarnating in, that it was so hard to maintain. So to create something that would operate within us to match that inverted 3D, 2D, which was the inverted matrix and all its operating system. And plus, when the hybrids were put in place, for them not to be seen, for them to not be observed, we needed something that could create a smoke and mirror type of thing. But at the same time, the ego itself had its own software. So it projected and worked within our own operating system. So it was on the frontal lobe of our brain. So at that point in time, that software, even though it was a small factor in what the capacity of the brain and the mind can do, it was enough to create enough, how could I say, alternate way of seeing and so forth, that it did shift our experience. So the purpose of this software was to really operate within the inverted matrix. Without it, it was not possible to stay intact and functional, because we would be able to see further. Now, the modification did turn off 10 of the DNAs fully, and 2 of them will remain through a filtered state. So the input was minor to what we can get, so that the ego mind would be able to have a grander hold of the functioning. Now, the ego itself is a fight-flight software program where it basically creates the illusion, first of all, that we're separate from one another. We can't trust one another, that we have to take advantage of one another. We have to be in one way or another to challenge and compete with one another. But not only that, it created the illusion of safety and non-safety, or danger, whatever you want to call it, and created certain ways of relating to it and supporting it. So the fact of the ego itself was a survival operating system. But the survival didn't stop just on the survival. There was this other program called violence, or what we call fear, but also reaction of anger. But there was also another component to all of that that came into, and it was feeling isolated completely, and it had to go into survival mode. Okay? So in that essence, it did not see that we were a team of beautiful beings of ourselves being on the planet any longer. So now, this particular software had the capacity to learn and adapt accordingly. Now, I know the inverted matrix kept feeding new codes, new operating systems, and so forth, plus egos played with other egos. So they sustained each other back and forth. It created separation, but it did work together very much so. Now, with other egos, which all of us came through. So what the software did, it basically disconnected us as much as possible from ourselves, the other aspects of ourselves. So it created not only a separation from one another, separation from Gaia, separation from all other levels, but only separation, even separation within ourselves. You were going to say something?
Yes. Lena is asking, fight and flight effect, is it reptilian brain?
Yes. Yes. The reptilian brain is part of the ego operating system. That was, again, that was established only as the modification came about. Because prior to that, there was always harmony, balance, and so forth. So the fact that every sentient being honored each other, including the humanity. So it was always in that. So the fight and flight of this reptilian brain, which was basically plugged in by first the Anunnakis, and we're talking the hybrid ones, and the draconian versions that were put in. But that's what the ego itself was. So that software was absolutely necessary for us to be able to stay within that inverted matrix and continue to project the inverted 3D and 2D state. Now, there was every system is based on that. That's why it affects our world, because each one of us have created this particular so-called world. Now, the other part of the ego itself, the operating system itself, created such an environment to keep us not only disconnected, like I was saying, from the body and so forth, to create an alternate version of you. Okay? So there's a holistic you, which basically integrates with the body, with the human entity, with the soul and the mind. That part of you is a holistic you. It's a knowing you as source itself that is part of all of its parts that are all made up of that one unit. What the ego does is basically created something totally, a completely different version of yourself. That version identified itself with names, labels, stories, programs. In fact, it would look around and see the world as a certain way and would fit right in there, saying, this is who I am. I am this profession, I am this gender, I am this culture, I am this education, I am this, I am that. And in fact, the ego works in such a way to keep you so busy not respecting, but holding on to that definition, that it leads you from not discovering who you are, bringing the rest of you into play. The other thing it also does with the ego, it has a capacity, and this is the evolutionary part, because the evolutionary part of this software, which is the self-learning, the artificial intelligence component of the software, is that whenever you started to connect more with yourself, it would create more distractions, would create more diversions, would create other opportunities to get lost in the mind and get lost in the stories and whatever else. Because the ego itself is designed to look at the history of your life, your past, and continue to drag the past, label the past, and reshape it over and over again, and to bring it always in your present moment. So in fact, you're never in the present moment because it's dragging the past with you all the time. So you'll notice that all of a sudden a thought of something that happened maybe a long time ago, maybe not that long ago, but it keeps bringing to different scenarios. You may be in the middle of doing something and all of a sudden there's this memory comes up. But it doesn't even stop there, because this artificial intelligence likes to use something called emotions. And emotions engages the body and creates not only a strong emotional feeling within yourself, but also changes the chemistry of how your body works. And it also affects the organs and everything else in its functionality through those things. It uses emotions, and usually the polarized emotions, more on the negative side, to kind of hold you back. So it does all of that. The other thing it likes to do is, besides taking the past, it projects it into the future, even things that have not been created. So the reason it projects it, again, it's part of the distraction, it's part of the deviation, and it's part of keeping you in that world. So if you're always feeling I am unsafe, or feeling that in one way or another I got to protect myself, I have to go and put things together, or I need to plan and shape my life and so forth, to a certain degree, a small portion of that has some value. The rest of it becomes distraction. It actually limits our opportunity to create everything new. So you'll see, and it also doesn't want to let go of what you have. It could be a relationship, it could be your career, it could be a certain life stream. It wants to hold on to everything because it creates this illusion of security, of limitations, of scarcity, and so forth. And the purpose of that is just to keep you distracted. What's the distraction for? The distraction is to keep us from connecting with ourselves and be able to access higher aspects of ourselves. That's why people use meditation to quieten the mind. Well, what are we quietening? Are we really quietening the mind, or are we quietening the ego? Because the ego works within the mind, creating all the stories. Now, of course, the ego not only looks at the past, but also looks at anything else it can have access to. So it also looks at the outside world. So whatever the media, whatever is being projected or experienced by anybody else, and uses that as a reference point to create another path of stories and patterns and so forth. So you're constantly busy in that. Now, with all of that, it also creates the story where you have to stick around and play the game as you've learned it, as you've experienced it at this point. And really, it creates this whole projection which uses fear for change. This is why we're afraid of change, because it creates the illusion that change equates to unsafe. It equates to the unknown, and the unknown is not only not safe, but the unknown is something that is out of the realm of the ego mind, and saying, I cannot assist you there because I have to learn what you're going to play with so that I can adjust accordingly to support you. And even though the support is really not quite the support you're thinking, it's providing something totally different. So to understand all of this, the ego software, again, you have to understand it is a software, it's an operating system. Now, when this operating system's in place, it will create at times stress, it will create fears and so forth. With that, what happens? We hold our breath. We notice that our breath gets really shallow, and there's a purpose behind that, because if we hold back on breathing more freely, our carbon dioxide in our body increases, the oxygen drops, activating the frontal lobe, where the fight and flight operating system, or we can call the reptilian brain, that has been established there, takes precedence, steps up. And the rest of the brain is, even though it has a lot of input, it does not have the same impact, because you're into the fight and flight. And the fight and flight is, in a very powerful way, a capacity of taking us outside and disconnecting us from even further from any other aspects of ourselves. So when we're in fight and flight, rationality, the fact of intuitiveness, higher awareness diminishes tremendously. So a lot of times whenever we're having anxiety, stress, fear, whatever is going on, if we put our focus on the breath and we make sure we take some really deep breaths, and drop the CO2 in our body and increase the oxygen level, then it starts to quieten the frontal lobe where the ego resides and where it creates. So now you're activating more of the rest of the brain where all the other inputs are there. So what happens is you calm down, you access higher awareness within yourself, just by focusing on the breath. See, that's a huge step in just breathing. And that's why when people are panicking, if you slow down and just breathe deeply and repetitively in succession, that what happens, it drops your CO2 and increases the oxygen, and then everything starts to stabilize and you're shifting away from the fight and flight. The other thing too, with the breathing, when you're raising your oxygen, dropping the CO2, then what happens is your body goes more alkaline. When your body's more alkaline, your body's not responding in the same way as fight and flight within your body itself. So the body's immune system is not on a high, red alert sort of thing. It's because it actually contains things at a certain level. So you're now creating more connection with yourself, your whole body, your human entity, and your soul. So, this is one of the reasons why certain alkaline foods and so forth make us feel that we're more connected. Because we become more connected because the other parts of it are not interfering as much. So natural raw foods and so forth keep the ego mind somewhat at bay too. And of course, breathing keeps it quite a bit more at bay. But at the same time, the body itself is actually getting out of that fight and flight state of response, because that's the instruction it used to get most of the time, and it's created patterns within itself so that it basically starts to calm down. Now, the understanding with the ego mind itself, we had agreed to take it on. We agreed in one way or another to utilize this as part of our experience moving forward in our journey of life. Now, we've come to a point where we are very much now at a state where we need to create a shift. Not only that, we've agreed to make a shift. We've made a commitment to make a shift. And for us to make a shift, we have to start shifting away from the reference point of the ego. Now, the ego is going to be very much active within ourselves to kind of remind you that this game is the way it is and that you can't get out of it. In fact, it basically wants to support you in staying the same. Now, the ego itself, when you're really looking at it, it requires to learn and it requires to get new resources. So if you're being exposed to a tremendous amount of input through media and other observation, when I say media, we're talking about movies, shows, TV, whatever it is, all the different things, including all the other stuff that's mainstream at this point in time, plus observation of whatever's going on. Now, it needs to take that a constant input to reinforce itself to stay within that pattern through that operating system. Because what it's looking for, everything that enforces the inverted matrix, that supports basically the 2D part and the inverted 3D part. It's looking for anything to refer it because that's what it requires, what it wants. So it's going to look at every source. So you have somebody saying fear because of this or that, whatever it is, and this is the way of life, and you're showing violence. Okay? If you're exposed to violence, you're exposed to the lower state of humanity, being exposed to the fight and flight, the danger, and the fact that, things will harm you, you have no control, that there's authority that controls everything, there's an authority that has to tell us how to do things, there's an authority of a way to live life, and that we have all of this. That reinforcement is what the ego wants to keep its grip, or in this case, its solidity in its operating system so it can do its job more effectively. So it's a learning ego, or a learning artificial intelligence. And it's not only learning from you, it's learning from others. So you'll notice that the egos can get very active when it engages with somebody else that's playing with ego. And most of us are. So one's going to say one thing back and forth, and you're going to see that at times you can get into a conversation which very much so supports each other in that lower vibration, because it's saying, oh yeah, did you hear this? Did you hear that? Well, I heard this. And then there's not only a competition, but then there's also reinforcement. So the two egos are reinforcing each other and giving each other more food, more energy, more reference point to keep you in that state. So when you're looking at that, your exposure to what is around us and what you choose to engage will either promote and reinforce the operating system, or it will actually weaken it. So this is the thing, when you go into this observer state and you're now just observing it and seeing it as a video game or whatever else, and every time that the ego is spewing out certain stories, programs, belief systems, and whatever else, and using different references, then you can easily say, no, we're not going there, and you're not going to give power to it. And then, of course, if you focus on the breath, it's also helping you too, because you're not giving it the same input or connection to how it does. So that's the ego software. Now, the ego software itself, besides the learning part, it has the capacity to fragment, capacities to compartmentalize. That means that the ego can become schizophrenic, or what we call bipolar or tripolar, or whatever you want to call it. What does that mean? That, let's say, here's you with your ego, and and it says, okay, you know something? I'm looking after you. We got to do something. We got to go from here to here. All right? So it's going to tell you to take certain steps based on either the past or other reference point. For example, we got to protect ourselves because there's some dangerous stuff out there. And, you know, we need to go through all of these things. You need to take these medications or whatever it is, right? Or that you need to go and do this or that, whatever it may be. So it will urge you over and over again that we need to do it and give you multiple reasons why. Now, the reasons itself is not just the reasons that it has from you, that you have stored in your subconscious mind as labeled ideas, but it also looks around and says, oh, look at that. We just saw on CNN and this is this, and we really got to take precaution. And then that particular doctor said to do this, and this particular expert said about this, and this person said about that, and look at what the government is saying, all of these things, and look, we're seeing all these movies and all of these different things that are telling us that, yeah, we got to go from here to here. That's it. We got to do it. And it's going to create story after story after story. So what's going on? You're getting the urging from here to go here. So you start down that path. Along the way, the ego takes different roles. It's going to say, oh, you're not going there fast enough. You're not doing this effectively. You're screwing up because you only got part of it. We need to do more. We need to take more steps. We need to be afraid. We need to protect ourselves. We need to do all of this stuff. So along the way, it's kicking your butt, telling you that you're not doing it right. You're not doing it right. You're not doing it right, all the way through. When you get to this point that it's directed to you, it will make you feel that you really, really screwed up. Because what it's doing, it's urging, correcting you all the way through, and then telling you that you didn't do it right at the same time. And if there's a contradicting in story information, you go, oh, see how foolish we were to go down that path. You know, it's saying, well, you need to get into this relationship. You're in the relationship. I'm not doing the relationship very well because I'm damaged goods or something of that nature. I need to work harder. I need to do this and that. And then you get in a relationship. See, look at that relationship. We really screwed up. Same thing with career. Same thing with kids. Same thing with any part of your life. Oh, look, you know, you were going to go see your family. Now you went to see your family. Now you feel bad, whatever it is. So see how it actually creates. So it promotes, it kicks you along the way. And then when you get there, it finds an alternate. The reason it did that is to create these multiple layers of keeping you really engaged in distraction. And now the ego is not being supported by the energetic input and the codes that were being streamed and the, what do you call it? The spectrums of frequencies that it was being receiving before, because that has been cut off, because the inverted matrix is not there, the satellite, the transmitter that was the moon itself is no longer transmitting and so forth. So it doesn't have the same resource. Now it's using every part of every aspect of any past memories and any observations that it's made through everything else that it's being exposed to. So when we're talking about the ego itself, all right, so we got an understanding of how this works. Now let's take another side to this. I said, okay, the ego needs to learn. Okay, so it's getting a lot of resources. Now you have to understand, this inverted matrix and also the role players, what we call the 0.001%, and then the 0.1%, and then also the 1% that are playing various roles that have created this inverted 3D and are still supporting the inverted 3D, or what we call the inverted matrix perception and coming through, have spent a lot of time to push even further to reinforce this, because this is losing its grip. It's losing its grip because the ego itself and the so-called operators, the operators of this inverted matrix, I think I better change this, inverted matrix and so forth, are losing its access point too. It's losing the energy because a lot of all of this operating system, we're not going to go back into what I've already talked about in other episodes where, you know, what we call the Lucifer operating system that was installed in these hybrids, and the fact of the different encodements and so forth, requires very low frequency, very low vibrational states and emotions. And this is why there's a lot promoted through fear, because fear lowers your vibration. As your vibration goes lower, you disconnect further and further, or have less and less access to source essence, even though you're still in it, but you're dropping. So that means your access to consciousness, access to self-empowerment, access to self-navigation drops, and then you're now, the ego is saying, oh, we got to see what everybody else is doing. So if everybody's walking around with a mask, it will have a tendency to say, hey, listen, everybody else is doing, we got to do this. So even though there's a certain level of consciousness and awareness that it's not a requirement, it doesn't even work and actually works backwards and causes more problems than anything else, that in some way we need to go there. But that consciousness goes into it. And that's why there's so much fear being generated. Fear, the fact of, you know, that we can be harmed, and that we have to go into survival, so that it lowers our frequency. And then if we discover what's going on, then we get angry, which is the same thing. It lowers the access to higher consciousness. It creates more separation, more focus on the frontal lobe, where the ego has a bigger grip, and at the same time we're disconnecting not only from the body, from a human entity, the soul, and also that higher consciousness. You were going to say something.
Lena's asking, is it only the moon that was involved, I guess, for streaming in that those programs like the inverted matrix, or is there other places for streaming these programs like MK?
Okay, yeah, so that was the main one. That was the main, okay. So basically, the moon itself was a satellite that supported the inverted matrix. The inverted matrix is gone, the satellite's no longer transmitting. Now, the MK stuff and all of these other operating systems that are still active, they're active, and of course they're using satellites, what we call regular satellites. They're using some of the cellular frequencies and so forth to stimulate what they've already been putting in our body through the air, the water, and so forth, and also the exposure of different chemicals and whatever else that we put in our body. So that is encoding and still supporting that. Now there's a lot of people that have gone to a state where they've actually cut off access to most of the brain, and everything is focused within the frontal lobe, and it's also focusing on the ego. But when they go through that other type of programming, like the MK mind control and all of that stuff, this goes on steroids. It's a different type of programming. It basically now creates a closed loop, so it doesn't even allow any other access in there. And certain frequencies, certain activation words and codes can actually shift through another sequence of programs, all built into this, that would respond a certain way and would not even realize that they are. Okay, so that too is being challenged, even that. Now, the frequencies that are coming onto the planet, which is basically generously being shared by our own sun, the galactic sun, but also our planet itself, is increasing and changing the way we would respond to the encodements that we have and the transmissions that we've been receiving, so that in fact, it's actually preparing the body, it's preparing the mind to be able to be in that environment, but not affected in that environment or whatever input that was coming in. So we're not quite there where we're totally disconnected, but many of us are gotten very little access or have very, how can I say, are not affected as much. But others, the majority, are still very much affected, but it's already shifted. A lot of it has already shifted to a degree where we're not in the same position that we were before, where it had a grander effect. Now, this is the reason that some of the stuff that's played out has also stimulated more fear, because it's losing its capacity and its grip. And even the ego mind, or the ego software, is actually becoming destabilized. It's actually having what you can call glitches. You know, you've probably heard of matrix glitches. Well, the ego mind itself is having its own glitches. Now, more with some others than others, or some people more than others. So the glitches itself is basically losing. And this is one of the reasons that, you know, in some of those programs that I've talked about, that I've done workshops and so forth, I've talked about where if you go into the state where you're asking your soul, not your soul, your ego mind, as it's giving you stories, say, so what? What's happening? What's the point? Or, you know, in a sense it says, oh, we got to be careful. Why? Well, because of this and this. So what? This and this and this. So what? And what happens is, as you dig deeper, or you're questioning, of course you got to write all this stuff down as you're doing it, you get to the point where you're getting the glitches. You're going into a certain compartment that it doesn't have a backup. And now it's going to try to grab anything and everything, but you're not going to give it any power. So that overall consciousness now becomes, using every other aspect of yourself, becomes the one that's actually allowing yourself to go deeper into it and deprogram what grip it may have on you. So when we're looking at how things are playing out right now, the ego is destabilizing, the systems are destabilizing. Now, so what it does, the way it shapes our lives, the ego itself likes to create an identity of itself. It says, this is who I am, and this is what I need, and this is right, this is wrong, this is good, this is bad, and I can change my mind along the way, and I'm going to want more. Not only more, I'm never going to be satisfied. It'll create the illusion of satisfied, but it'll never be satisfied, because it's not designed to be satisfied. It's designed to always keep you chasing after something. It also attaches ideas that if you have this, then you'll be happy. If you achieve this, then you'll be happy. Again, it's using polarization, and that happiness, even if you achieve it, is temporary, because what happens is it can't have you get to the state of saying, oh, I'm happy now, I'm all satisfied. No, it's got to find something else. It's got to keep you moving away from your organic self, your true holistic self, to this illusionary self. The ego likes to also identify itself with its status, its labels of who you are, what you've done, what you didn't do, and so forth, and also apply worth and unworthy and all of that stuff, good or good enough or whatever it is, or the fact that you need to have attention and all of that. Again, all part of the distraction. So it creates a false version of you. Because once you notice that, you'll notice that that version of you is always unstable. That version of you is never accomplished. It may feel temporarily this and that, but it's always searching for more. Not that it's searching for more, it's just keeping you busy. And that's how it's designed. So the fact is, I am such and such, and I need to be respected, and this and that, and whatever else. That's the ego. It's not you, the true you. And that I have these achievements, or that I need to have this or that, whatever it is. This is all what that operating system does. So the reason I'm saying all of this is so that you observe it and you notice where it's coming from. Because, a lot of people, come to the point where saying, I don't know who I am. I don't know why I'm even here. I don't know what my purpose is about, or anything of that nature. That's when the ego is starting to get destabilized, or it unplugs enough to back off to kind of create the confusion. Then it can jump in and says, oh, well, we got to do this, we got to do that. Because that part of you, and many of us have already started to break up a lot of this old version of ourselves, which was the ego's perceptual idea version of you. That version of you, yes, had a history, had gone through certain experiences in its life. It had very traumatic or non-traumatic or dramatic or anything of that nature. Has had various experiences as different reference point. It has had various relationships and connections and so forth, and which we represent. We have certain education, certain status, and all of that stuff, and it uses all of that. But none of it is really you, because when you really understand it, every little piece was just an experience that doesn't matter how it was constructed, how it was utilized, but it was something that you moved through. So this is the key, to understand that you moved through. But the ego is not going to do that. It wants to do whatever it does. So many of us are going through a reality check. It's going through a life crisis of sorts. And what that is because your higher self, your human entity, your body are coming together more and more and saying, listen, okay, we got to bring this on track. We came here for our very purpose. We need to make some massive progress. We've agreed to be instrumental in this change and to be an active role player here. So in fact, we're going to have to do whatever it takes to shut down or minimize as much as possible this operating system. Or else, we can't move forward. Not in the way that we want to. I mean, we're always moving forward to some degree, but not to the same thing. So what's it going to do? It's going to make arrangements for you to have certain engagements, certain activations, and so forth. And when I'm talking about being triggered to bring up emotions, to bring up stories, to bring up perceptions and labels and whatever happened, so that we just purge it out. We experience it fully and let it go. And what we're doing is just purging all of that stuff out, because all of it was laid out from this operating software through the inverted matrix in our 2D inverted 3D state of being. If you look at the world, you look at your life, everything's been backwards. And now we're starting to realize more and more that my life has been working a certain way, but it never satisfied, never felt in alignment, and it never really brought me what I feel fulfilled within. And this happy sad thing, this polarity thing, and one day I'm feeling good, another day I'm not feeling good. I can never really be present or experience any of that part. Those parts are coming up. Those observations, those stimulations within yourself are coming up, so that you actually start to use more of yourself, which is basically what we're, not only Gaia, our body, our human entity and soul, to be more of the navigator within your mind that is creating your reality, your individualized reality, and the different collective realities, including the collective on the planet. So when we're talking about how does this shape our life, the way we think, the way we feel, the way we respond, the way we refer ourselves, the way we see ourselves, the way we see other people, the choices we make, the directions we take, the things that we ingest, and whatever else is pretty heavily through this. And that is what we're unraveling. That is what we're purging. So if you look at your life was created through the inverted matrix, 2D, 3D, through the ego software. So now we're just bringing all that, because our whole world, so when we go back, okay, that's how it shaped our life. And don't think education and what we've observed from others, doesn't matter from mass media or from any resource that have dictated a certain way of life and certain protocols and so forth, was not part of shaping your life. It shaped your life, and this used it to shape your life, because you really shape your own life, but this software has played a powerful role. So it has shaped your life, and that shaping of your life collectively has shaped the world. If you look at every operating system that exists, from every corporation, every services and constructs and systems and governmental and everything else that exists right now, of all the systems from medical to education to governmental, health, you name it, all of these different levels have all been created through this. Look at how many people right now are under this control structure, which will never want to be wrong. The ego doesn't want to be wrong. It will beat you up at some point with being wrong, but it doesn't want to be wrong, because it wants to hold on to whatever it adopted, to continue to project it as long as possible, because at the moment we start to see that it isn't that world, because that's the world we're seeing. We're seeing it through the eyes of a software program that says, this is what you're seeing. And this is how it shapes your life. It tells you what you're seeing. You can see a beautiful rose, but you're going to see it in the version that it dictates it. It could be, it will find faults in it, or the fact that in some way or another it shouldn't even be there, or that you're looking at this and saying, well, look, it attracts bees, or whatever. I'm just giving you as an example. It will find anything and everything. It just basically allows you to see, to match its operating system. Okay, go ahead.
To clarify, so if you wake up in the morning and you feel off, could it be, and you feel it's the energies coming in, is that triggering an ego program, or what is the difference? So, or is that your soul saying something's off? Do you know what I'm trying to relate to you?
Yeah, no, if you're waking up in the morning and you're feeling triggered or off or whatever it is, depending on what you've experienced overnight through your dream state and your altered state at that point in time, it may have triggered certain programs, stories, and belief systems that you have within yourself. Other times it's just the ego itself reacting to something that it's seen. So you're going to feel off. Now, of course, the energies are going to feel off because it's purging the imbalanced frequencies that we've stored in our body. So it's stimulating that to kind of bring it up to the surface. So we're doing the purging part of it. But a lot of times if you feel bad and you feel, especially the dream state, you may have a dream that may trigger you, push your buttons, do whatever. Now, the dream state is used a lot in this process that we're going through. The reason I'm saying that is because we can't always experience and create certain levels of reality that we experience as reality as effective and efficiently, where you're in and out to the point where you can move from one experience to another very quickly. Because in this realm, when we're experiencing, everything moves a little slower. Even though everything is speeded up, it's still moving very slow in comparison. Dream state is, it can create, bring in individuals, bring in through the observation point, different role players, put you in certain scenarios that would take quite a bit of effort to actually replicate it in what we call awakened state. So in the dream state, the limits are not there, and you can plug in anything. Now, when you come out of it, how you feel will also be indicating that something got triggered, or something, even if you saw something negative, okay? And then you come up with the idea that, oh, there's a lot of negativity in the world, or there's a lot of destruction in the world, or there's something that we need to feel bad. Now, your higher self is not so much going to be responding to that in that fashion. The body may have some emotional reactions and so forth, but it's really the ego mind that it's actually going to be the one that's reacting. That's the part that's, you know, making a big deal out of it and trying to reinforce that it's dangerous or this or that, or whatever it is. So again, it's still a part of the process of clearing out programs and whatever else that's coming up, and that's the purpose of it. So the dream state is being used heavily for us to allow ourselves to go through the various levels of triggering and purging, and that's why it comes up a lot quicker, because we can so much more can be achieved in the dream state versus the awakened state. The awakened state works a lot slower, and it takes a little bit more interactions to make it happen. So that's how it comes in that regards. Was there something else you wanted to mention? No? Okay. So, in understanding the ego itself, what we look at right now is you take time, and when I say take time, you make time or arrange your time to spend some time with yourself. And you could look at different facets of your life. You can look at different facets of certain patterns of what you experience. And when you're looking at that, you can ask yourself, focus on the breath, okay? Make sure you breathe and take deep breaths, one after the other, until to the point you start to feel a little bit dizzy. Make sure you're sitting down though, and you're not driving or anything of that nature. Now, when you're driving, you can take deep breath, but make sure you don't bring it to the point of where you're, feels like you're hyperventilating or anything like that. That's not what you want to do, or operating anything that you need to have your attention with. But in a quiet state, if you focus on the breath and oxygenate, is that the right word? Oxygenate your body and drop your CO2 from your body, then what happens is you're activating more of the brain, more of your mind, where you're having more access to other levels of consciousness, higher levels of awareness, including sourceness. And you're putting less attention and focus, depleting the access of the ego mind on the frontal lobe. So by doing that, then you can look at different parts of your life. So first of all, quiet your mind, focus on the breath, increase the oxygen, then tapping into yourself and look at certain things. So you could do this. Let me backtrack a little bit. If there's certain things you want to look at your life on, you can say, okay, these are some of the things that I'm troubled by, or I'm uncomfortable by, or I need to make a decision, or that I need to create a shift in myself. Then what you're going to do is you're going to write it all out, all of the things. And then what you can do is follow that process that I just mentioned, where you just close your eyes, you focus on the breath, and any idea of the ego mind or any thoughts that come in, just just let them be, but focus on the breath and increasing the inhalation and exhalation fairly rapid and deep, and increasing the oxygen and decreasing the carbon dioxide in your body, then what happens is you're now tapping into your higher intuitive state. And when you do that, now you can get a clear understanding of what needs to change and what you need to shift away from because it doesn't serve you. That could be relationship, that could be career, it could be certain addictions and so forth. Because addictions is very much that too. Addictions, if you actually are able to put a lot of focus on the breathing part and keep your oxygen level high and your carbon dioxide low, it does affect on the addiction side. And you don't have to have the same level of discomfort if you're actually dropping a certain addiction, and you're not going to have the same levels of withdrawal. So you want to be focusing on that and then write things out. Now, of course, you're going to put your focus in your heart at that point, but just the fact of the clarity of the mind, the clarity of your thoughts, the clarity of the intuitiveness by just doing the breathing and increasing the oxygen and decreasing the carbon dioxide will assist in a very powerful way for you. Then you could look at the different things in your life and get a little clear direction or choice point or something of that nature. This is a way to also empower, because you're not here to look for answers from others, or a lot of people create what do you call it, dependency on others, or dependency on your guides, dependency on, yeah, you can bring them in and so forth, but you want to start off with you. And in that state where you are more into it, then that can come through much easier for you, even when you're communicating with the guides. Because what happens is, if we have so much activity from the ego perspective or from the ego itself and from the frontal lobe, then the rest of it, even if you're getting input, it gets kind of discounted and it doesn't really get used. So you may get the answer, you may get direction, you may get clarity or anything of that nature, but you don't end up using it, or using it very minimally and maybe much later too, rather than using it at the time that it's being provided. So just use some of that at this point. Now, a lot of people are also concerned about the fact of, if I lose the ego, will I know who I am? Well, if you lose the ego, or the ego becomes less the director of your life, because eventually this software, for us to go into organic 3D and organic 5D, cannot exist. Because this is only designed for one thing, the inverted matrix, 2D, inverted 3D. And I know some people might say, what the heck is 2D, inverted 3D, inverted matrix, the ones that haven't been following. If you're new to this, this whole idea that we're going from 3D to 5D is not really clear, because really we're not going from 3D. We're actually going from an inverted 3D and 2D state to an organic 3D and organic 5D. So the organic version, because when we were originally programmed and designed and put into place, because our bodies are a makeup of 12 different species and whatever else, and then the programming and everything else, we started off with organic 3D with the potentiality to go organic 9D. And if everything was still operating the way it should have been, without any interference, we would be already at organic 7D, experiencing and creating realities and so forth. So, and then moving forward from there. But we're not. And in that sidetrack, that opportunity to go down that path was a choice that we made. We chose to agree to play with it and to see what we can do with it. Now, it's not that we're making a correction, we're making a change, because it no longer serves us. We've already saturated that experience of playing 2D, inverted 3D in an inverted matrix world. We have so much reference to that. We've gained whatever we needed to gain from it, but it did not serve not only for ourselves in physical form, our planet Gaia, but it didn't serve within our solar system, and it didn't serve any longer in our galaxy. So, and of course the universe after that. But in essence, all of that needed to be adjusted accordingly, because of the fact that we're done with that experience. So right now we're going through this whole process. Now, with this going on, you're going to see accentuation and then further separation. And when I'm talking about separation, because we did have some pretty powerful shifting that's gone on to accentuate the polarity even further, so that the ones that want to play in that 2D inverted 3D state is now getting more immersed into that, and the ones that want to play in the organic 3D and organic 5D are that. So you'll see that the separation is where you cannot interact to the same degree for any period of time, and in some cases next to impossible to do so, while this process is going through, where each cluster is going through whatever they need to go through to actually bring themselves to a state where they can actually utilize what's beneficial. So the separation accentuation is really part and parcel of, accelerating this process going through. You're going to say something?
This was a question before about the dream, coming out of dream time. What can we do to get energy back after these dream states or astral travel?
Okay. So the breathing helps very much so. So, you come out of those states, and of course, a lot of times it feels very depleting. So what I would suggest is just to stay in that relaxed state and focus on the breath. Now, when you're focusing on the breath, you also invite the highest vibrational energies to come through. So a couple of things you can do. You can call your soul and ask your soul to fully embody. So soul, I call you forth to fully embody, to activate the soul's home frequency. So you can say, soul, activate full home frequency. Then you can also say to yourself, I now activate my highest source essence within the body construct, or as much as the body can handle at this point. By doing so, and then focusing on the breath and increasing the oxygen level, because what happens a lot of times through the dream state, we stop breathing. We reduce the amount of oxygen, and we go into heavy dose of carbon dioxide within ourselves. So now it activates the ego very much so. So it goes into either panic, or not that it goes into panic, it projects this whole panic and feels, icky or whatever it is. And it can also drain your energy. So by bringing those two components, your soul in with activating its own frequency, and for the people that don't know what the home frequency means, it means the frequency, the highest frequency that the soul can emit from all its experiences, incarnations, and so forth on different planets and whatever else. And your source essence of your body. You can also ask your body, innate consciousness, to also re-energize, but then focus on the breath and just breathe deeply and rapidly to increase the oxygen, and you'll notice that it will stimulate a shifting from that lower, drained, tired state. That will help. Now, of course, there's going to be phases where we are going through some pretty heavy changes within ourselves, the reconstructing of our bodies and encodements and so forth. So you may not feel as much energy at times. So make time to stop every so often and just kind of focus on the breath, and even take a nap if you can, or just quieten down during the day, and that will keep you energized and so forth.
Can you just quickly again go over that whole calling in soul home frequency and higher essence?
Okay, so I'll just repeat that part of it. So you're coming out of your dream state, or you're having, even during the day, you may have certain triggers and whatever else energetically and everything else that may lower your frequency, lower your energy level, and so forth. So you can close your eyes, you can focus on the breath for a few minutes. Then you ask your soul to fully embody. Soul, higher self, fully embody. Soul, activate home frequency. That is the frequency that it has from multidimensional state of being. So that will already stimulate. Then you now say, I also, from that state of view, I also activate the highest source essence my body can contain. Because you are source. the highest source essence that your body can contain. And then, once you've done those, stay with the attention of the breath, breathing deeply and fairly rapidly to increase the oxygen and to decrease the carbon dioxide, and allowing the energy to flow through the body. And that will help you energize. And whenever you're doing whatever you're doing and you're starting to feel that low, just close your eyes and just focus on the breath, bring that oxygen level. By doing so, it also creates an environment where your pH increases, potential oxygen, or hydrogen, I guess they call it, potential hydrogen, increases in your body, and it also creates or supports well-being. So it will allow you to address certain health issues and whatever else at the same time, and improve the environment within your body. So use those as it. Is that clear enough? Or?
I believe it was just to explain what bringing in that meant, bringing in the soul and the source essence.
Yeah, so what happens to us, even with, just to clarify that a little further, our soul comes and goes, okay? We're still always connected. We never really disconnect unless, there's an agreement to partake, and then either another soul comes in or it uses it as an exit completely. We won't go into all those details because I'll cover that in another episode. But at times, depending on our experience, that we're not in a position where it's absolutely necessary to have our soul direct us because we're operating on ego mind or operating on automatic pilot or something of that nature. We're not utilizing our resources to be able to do things more effectively, so the soul ends up doing back-end work, or actually goes in recharge, or have different experiences. And especially through the dream state at times, because when we're sleeping, a lot of times the soul is not fully in our body because it goes and does other things. So what you want to do is call it back in and do the process that I just shared again, and bring that. So that helps you go through it. So the same thing. If you have fear, if you have anxiety at certain points, if you have a state of panic, okay, or intense emotions, use that process, okay? You first of all start with the breathing, okay? Breathe. It's so important. It balances, does so much. Breathe. And by breathing and making those adjustments in the amount of oxygen and so forth, then calling in your soul, whatever, it will break the pattern of that anxiety, that fear, that loneliness, whatever you may be experiencing, because then other facets of yourselves feel that rest of the connection. And then many more options open up instead of that narrow path that it looks at. Because the ego, when it's in charge, really, really does this. Really wants you to see a very narrow path of life. So your viewpoint is looking at all of this, and it's really saying, that's all we got. And this is all conditioned by programs and so forth and whatever else that we've used to condition ourselves from everything that you exposed. But the thing is, when you are focusing on the breath and you bring that other part of you, it actually opens up, so you have much more. This what it does, it shows you one or two options. Okay, let me put the two part in there. Two options. When you're looking at from that higher perspective, the options become much more variety, much more possibilities, much more choices, and it also gives you a broader view. So it's like you stepping back and seeing a bigger screen so you can see more details, and then you could decide and direct yourself to much more of what is available rather than that just little sliver, what happens? The ego mind, when it creates an illusion of a problem, okay, it will look for a solution, but the solution is usually fear-based and it's very limited. Oh my God, this is what's going to happen to us. If I don't get the okay for this loan or for this situation or whatever it is, I'm using examples here, then, and it's going to create a tremendous amount of story. Well, we're going to go bankrupt, we're going to collapse, we're going to lose this, we're going to lose that, or whatever it is. It creates all of that. Now, when you do what I just described for you before, when you open it up from a higher perspective, using much more resources, it doesn't see the limits and says, okay, this is our current scenario, current experience, and this is what we have to play with. What are my options? And now your options are a lot larger, more possibilities, more creativity and imagination is involved. Because if that doesn't work out, then it will have other options or backups or anything of that nature. But it also, at the same time, it's not even stressed about it if it doesn't go that way, because you get to know that you're going to find the perfect solution, or you're going to step into what is exactly going to support you in the best way.
Okay, couple things. So I was just going to say, it's all about embodying our soul into our body anyways right now. And that's will diminish the ego over time once we keep practicing doing that over time. Terry has a comment here, says, by talking to the ego and thanking it, sending love to it, then telling it I release you, of reminding me and set you free, you have mentioned also quiets the ego and programs it not to activate so much.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Because
the thing is, a lot of times what happens is we're not aware that the ego has that much power over us. We're not aware that it actually created an illusionary version of ourselves. Because if you look at it, in the ego world that we have within ourselves, it basically shapes our life. It actually allows us to be able to see certain things. Now, for example, the mainstream, okay? When it comes to fashion, likes and dislikes, what is acceptable, not acceptable, what is a way of life, what is acceptable in this way of life, who to play with, who not to play with, all of this stuff, the fact that we need to have more toys and more things and more whatever, the fact that a relationship or anything, a career or anything of that nature has to be a certain way, that is all constructs of the ego mind. The construct of the ego mind is also to create limitations. If it doesn't go this way, we need to be sad, we need to be unhappy, we need to feel bad, that we need to feel that we failed or that we were unworthy or anything of that nature. That's what it does. That's what it's programmed to do. So anytime you're seeing any of that, you know what is in play here, what is actually the part that is actually driving that. So what you're going to do is by, I see you, I thank you, I appreciate you, I love you, I relieve you, I release you, I free you from your responsibility. And by doing the other parts that we've plugged in with the breathing and everything else, it also facilitates it this way. But now we have to understand, through our redesigning, the stuff that we're going through right now, we're actually getting rid of the illusionary part of ourselves which was not embraced. See, the theme for the month of May was embracing all of yourself rather than living in a small world which was ego-based, ego program. Because most people walking around, including all of us at some degree or another, live in a world, it's an ego world. That ego world creates a certain illusionary idea of what that world looks like, how we are, what we do, what we don't do. So we live a small compartmentalized world. In that plugs in culture, gender, plugs in definitions of, where you're from, culture, this and that, history, whatever, religion, you name it. It plugs it all in. The only part that gives you power in all of that is this. Who you are, who you truly are, does not adhere to any of that. Could look at certain things, get some examples, have a short little experience, but it's not dictated by that. If religion, culture, gender dictates how you are, what you should be, how to respond, what's acceptable, not acceptable, that is not from who you are. It's from this. You cannot adhere to any limitations, programs, boxes, definitions, stories, ideas without this. You can't. It requires it to say, this is real. This has power over you. This is the way it is. And if you want to be accepted, you got to follow the rules. You got to follow what other people want. You got to follow what people think of you. That's all this. It's not who you are. Who you truly are doesn't put any emphasis on that at all. It is a beautiful, genuine aspect of yourself. You've come here to represent you, the frequency, the consciousness, and the representation of you that is instrumental in this beautiful map creation, whatever you want to call it, of what we call reality in a human body, in a human experience, and that's it. So if all of these things that are being projected, compartmentalized, ideas and concepts, this is the way to do it and whatever else, all of those things cannot function, cannot determine, cannot limit you in any way unless this is operating. So if you feel small, you feel stuck or anything of that nature, it's only this. It's creating that illusion. Because without that, you're free, you're open. Everything is a possibility. Everything is a creation. Everything is fully expression of imagination. We want a new world, want a new life. This is the part we deprogram ourselves from. Thank you, I love you, I free you. And we do that, and that's what we're doing. Because the world that we're living in is an ego world. Let me say that again. The world that we're living in is an ego world. It's been constructed through all the egos that have been participating. Through its original programming, projection, and so forth of the inverted matrix, inverted 3D, 2D. You were going to say something.
Yes, Veronica has a question. Is ADHD and ADD also play within the ego inverted matrix? Does that affect in having full connection with higher consciousness, higher self, body, entity when taking meds?
It does. Again, if you're going to, see, it's something that you need to monitor, use something temporarily while you go through the programming, deprogramming and so forth that you're experiencing. Most of the pharmaceuticals, most of the infrastructures that we have, the systems that we have to deal with various things do promote and are designed to promote more separation within ourselves so that we're not accessing that higher part of it. Now, in some cases, people that are experiencing some of those symptoms that you've just, or ailments as you call them, at this point in time, are categorized that way because the operating system is so unstable and it does not adhere to a certain pattern of way of life, and it may represent as, oh, they have ADD or ADH or whatever you want to call it. I always get these ADHD and ADD. Okay. There's lots of the alphabet. What do they call it? Diagnostics or diagnosis. So many of these are because they've come in to play a particular role, and their role is to destabilize these patterns. That's what a lot of children are coming through. Now, I know there's exposures to various pharmaceuticals and various things that act as toxins and so forth. But again, a lot of this stuff can be changed anyways. But the only reason the child will take that on, first of all, to show that we're doing this. Second of all, for them to actually destabilize our patterns. Because the ego says life is a sequence. Life has to follow certain rules, patterns, and so forth. Who you are is a free spirit, living moment by moment, creating each moment brand new and advancing along the way. The ego says, no, we have to create a consistency. We have to create a pattern. We have to follow these rules because everybody else has followed these rules. Or that somebody else of authority has said this is the way the rules or the game is played. So you're going to see all of those things coming into place. But that's just this operating system. It's not that higher aspect of yourself. Your higher aspect of yourself, like I said, is just living in the moment, moment by moment, creating each moment. When we are living moment by moment, we can really redesign, and we're also more observant of what this is spewing out so that we could observe it and shift away from it, or just basically neutralize it by choosing not to give it power, and also using some of the techniques I just shared with the breathing and also the fact of acknowledging it, thanking, loving it, and freeing it from its responsibility. I know that might sound weird to someone that's hearing it for the first time and saying, well, you know, responsibility. Yes, it is a responsibility that it has taken on. And it's really, you just say, okay, ego software. It's like anything. You can have a software on your computer. If you choose not to use it anymore, you're not going to activate it. If it kicks in, you're going to turn it off. You're going to do whatever it needs to do. Oh, well, you want to play, but we're not going to play there. We're done with this experience. So you could see how, you know, a software is a software and it operates within us, but we're superseding the usefulness of this software. The same way we are superseding the use of the 2D unconscious world, 3D of polarization, the inverted matrix where everything worked backward, the ego that worked, or the software that worked with all of this in conjunction because it wasn't possible without it, we're reaching to that point where it no longer is required. So we're deprogramming ourselves. And when we're talking about deprogramming, we're deprogramming, you know, labels and definitions that have been applied to experiences. Because when you really look at it, an experience is an experience. Let me say this again. An experience is just an experience. Until you label it, until you define it, until you give it power that it means one thing or another through this, it's just still an experience. But once this is labeled, that experience has a tremendous story and pattern and a certain sequence of how to feel, how to respond, how to view things, how to view yourself. So the deprogramming is really deprogramming, removing the labels, removing the definitions, and seeing everything in its perfection of just an experience. Through that, then it's easy to let all of that stuff go because that was an old world, an old version of you. You came here to experience that version, but you came here to transition, transmute, and to really purge all of that and create completion. And this lifetime, at this particular time, we're completing all lifetimes. We're completing lineage. We're completing any family dynamic stuff. We're clearing out and cleaning up and purging out, physical stuff that we've from our human consciousness, from a human entity, and also soul. Go ahead.
Linda's asking, okay, so her first was about not relating to a gender, male or female. Is that part of this? Because that, as we move up into the higher dimensions, there does come a time where we do not identify with male or female. Is that possible now, though, in fifth dimensional consciousness?
Yes. The thing is, when we're talking about the gender itself, yes, the higher dimension does not focus on gender and define itself through the genders, because what happens is the gender part has rules, stories, programs, belief systems around it. You can see how different parts of the world, different cultures have different definitions and labels about gender, and the rights and wrongs and goods and bads about it, and so forth. The gender roles, meaning that I play this, like the physicality is a physicality of expression, and each gender has its own specific operating system with a variance, not a huge variance, but at the same time it plays different roles in a sense. But it is not compartmentalized. So like what we call male energy or female energies, those again are part of polarization. What's happening now is becoming merged as one. So the definition, stories, programs, and belief systems that we've been carried all these years, how to dress, how to act, how to respond, who does what, who doesn't do this, whose role is that, or whatever it is, will no longer be adhered, so that it is a lot more flexible and it can be played out. Now, of course, a female gender has the capacity to be able to reproduce another physicality. The male will play a particular role in it, but the carrying and so forth. So that doesn't change, but the role playing, the meaning, the capacities of what each gender and the categorization of the genders starts to dissolve in the sense. So it's more of what one physicality can do versus the other, but it's very generic. It's not in that essence. Now, certain, of course, when we're going into higher dimensions, certain physicalities do not, have even differentiation between male and female or anything of that nature. It's not a gender thing that is being used as a focal point in different levels of consciousness. So the higher the consciousness, the less differentiation and definition is applied. So now what we're doing is we're actually breaking down all the stereotyping and all the different categorization that was created through this and the inverted matrix and so forth that was created this and that, being feminine, masculine, what this energy, that energy, and whatever else. So even though the people are saying, well, there's much more feminine energy coming in and there's also male energy, those are just basically energies that are merging, and it's creating that, equality in a sense, if you want to call it that, energetically, consciously, and so forth. But some of the mechanical functionality of the bodies itself may have a little bit of a difference because that's the way it was designed. Now, you can have a male and a female body, but look at the layers and layers of ideas, programs, belief systems, what the gender provides. That one's superior than the other, one is stronger than the other, one is more capable than the other, blah, 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 and all of this stuff. One needs to play this role, and one has to appreciate this, and the other one has to appreciate that, and so forth. Those were all applied through this and through the inverted matrix. And if you look at the inverted matrix, how it was designed in the inverted 3D, 2D, it always perpetuated separation. There's the female, there's the male, separate. Yeah, they come together, play a particular role, but it's always like two separate categories. So all of that is dissolving in that respect. Go ahead.
Okay, Annie has a question. Without conscious awareness that the ego is a program, how will the larger human collective disentangle themselves from it?
Well, the thing is, people are starting to realize more and more. They may not be able to identify it in the same way, saying, okay, well, there's my ego program coming up or anything of that nature. It's getting more and more uncomfortable to hold on to our old world. That world was created through the inverted matrix, or what we call the ego. Okay, so as much as they may not understand it as a program, more and more people are, but it's going to become more apparent that it is a software program. It is a program that actually, creates separation within ourselves of who we are. Not everybody's going to get it, not in this lifetime, and that's okay. Those ones will leave, or whatever else will occur, and so forth. But right now, more and more, this realization is coming forth. People are becoming more and more uncomfortable in the boxes that they've adhered to, which was all created in this ego operating system that we have. Plus, with all these energies coming in and everything else that's playing out right now, and other examples that are around us, is destabilizing the ego's functionality. Now, the ego itself is losing ground in the sense of its capacity to stay intact because of all that's being exposed, and it's not being supported. So it's going to push hard to maintain the polarization, separation, and so forth. But even that, it's losing its grip in a sense. Now, what happens is many more people that are becoming more aware of it, like individuals like yourselves, that are becoming more aware of it and that are playing a very particular role in that regards, then what happens is you're streaming that information, that consciousness, that awareness, and people are accessing it even unconsciously, and it's already making changes within themselves.
This is another question. I have a couple questions. So
Okay.
do you want to just do those?
Yeah, because
Okay.
I think I covered a lot.
Okay, so Evelyn is asking, do we need ego as a lifesaver? I'm assuming because of the fright and flight. No.
When we were playing the world of separation, when we were disconnected from ourselves as the creator, the illusionary fact that we are not the creator, that we're subject to others, subject to situations, subject to other experiences. Now, then we needed the fight and flight. That's what the illusionary part is. We don't see ourselves as a creator. We don't see ourselves as an active participant and designer of our reality and co-realities, that something else outside of us, and this is why deities have taken on power, and this is why certain authorities have taken on power, because the program says basically if we're not protected, we're not looked after, we're not giving our rights away or whatever it is, or our freedom, our sovereignty as it's called, then we're going to be unsafe. The thing is, the fight and flight thing is definitely programmed, okay? And once we step out of that, we will not create scenarios that would even require that to be part of it, because now you only create what serves you rather than the polarized part. The other thing about the polarity component, if the body itself is going to be exposed to something like falling off a cliff, it has enough memory knowing from other experiences that if you fall off, you're going to have a very strong accentuated experience with the potentiality of external damage that can terminate our journey. So the body will have memory of saying, oh, we got to step back, because this is not going to provide an opportunity or an experience that is going to be holistic to keep us intact. Okay? Now, of course, as you become more conscious and you become more aware of yourself, you're not going to even create that scenario. That is not even required as something that you need to put focus on that as you go along. So Do we need the fight and flight? No. And even the whole idea that, the animal kingdom is dangerous or anything of that nature, that's all shifting, because that's all representing the inverted matrix where all of that was altered. So the fight and flight was a necessity. But it was a plug-in with everything else that was plugged in at that point in time. So when we come to the realization that we create our reality and that we will not create anything that we choose not to experience, and that we can change it along the way at any point in time, then none of that is required, because that again limits us. So this fight and flight was not our natural design in the first place.
More questions.
Okay.
Okay. Victoria's asking, how about soul trauma?
Soul trauma.
Does the soul get traumatized at all? Or
No, the soul never gets traumatized. It will have a memory and an imprint of a certain thing, a certain experience. And if there is one, it would like to actually revisit it in a way where it can actually clear it out. So it wants to clear the imprint and that memory and gain whatever was there intentional to gain. For example, self-empowerment, for example, knowing that it actually had a choice from something that it experienced. The soul itself will project a certain experience only so that it can aid in one way or another, not only to clear itself, but to clear the human entity and the physicality, so it can work in alignment so that it can actually progress and move forward in a powerful way. So, but a soul, no, it does not end up having trauma. Maybe unfinished business, feeling something that it wants to clear or address along the way, yes. But the rest of it, no.
I guess a trauma would be more in human entity.
Human entity and the
in
physicality.
the physicality.
Yes.
Okay.
And now, of course, if it's in the subconscious mind and memory, then usually the ego likes to use that and keep projecting it and keeping it alive. But it's not something, because you have to understand the soul itself is from an interdimensional beingness. It knows its source. It knows that nothing can harm it. It knows that it's eternal. It's immortal. It's infinite. It knows all of that. Now, it may carry some imprints from previous experiences and so forth that it may want to clear, but that's about it. The rest of it is really in memories within the body and the human entity. Go ahead.
Okay, and going on to another question.
Okay.
From Mena, how can you differentiate between sadness because of old stored emotions being released and sadness created by ego, or are they one and the same?
They're one and the same.
Okay, sadness, she put over someone who has died specifically.
Yeah, the sadness, again, when you're coming from a higher perspective, there could be an experience of feeling someone is not there in the missing. So the soul basically knows that it just transitioned from one form to another, okay? And that existence never ceases to be. It may not be presenting itself in form. It may not be part of your reality in that form, but it knows that it's infinite and it's moved on and it plays a different role and it's never separate from it. When it comes to the body itself may have a connection to it, but it still doesn't feel any of that. When it comes to the human entity, if it has an old memory, a story program where it has an imprint of loss and it hasn't been able to see the grander aspect of it, so it might come up with that. But normally, the biggest component is the ego. The ego software will say, oh, this person's gone, they represented this to you, you need to feel bad, everybody else feels bad, you need to miss them, you need to feel hurt, you need to feel abandoned, you need to feel that now you have nobody to protect you, to love you, to be there for you, or that we need to feel bad because this person is no longer alive and was not able to live their life longer. It's going to create a lot of those stories, and which will, have picked it up from other people, from the collective, and also from its own personal experience every time it's lost something. So the body, not so much. The human entity can present that, but it's really a small component to what the ego will generate. It will generate stories, a huge story. And I've seen scenarios where I've worked with people over the years, and they may have been in a relationship that may not have been that great, to the point where there's always love on the background from a human perspective. Of course, soul perspective, there's always that love, but the individual dies. Now, the person may have felt that they didn't want somebody in their life, or they created a dependency on them being there, even though it wasn't nurturing, but then they checked out, for example. One party checked out, and then all of a sudden the ego goes, oh, now we got to feel bad, they're not there anymore. Oh, you didn't get to spend quality time with them. Oh, if you only took advantage of all the times that you could have had. And all of the so-called ego was creating all these negative perceptions of the thing before, now creates the opposite. It's like, oh my God, we lost somebody special. You're never going to meet somebody again. You're not going to have somebody there to support you. You can't do it by yourself, and so forth. So it's all interconnected. See how we can shift from one to the other.
Okay, another question, in case people are wondering, I'm going from Facebook to YouTube, so they don't see the question I'm asking. It's from the other page. Victoria is asking, how do we get out of the fight or flight program?
You're not supposed to.
Oh, stay in it forever?
Stay forever.
Yeah.
It's lots of
Just
fun.
for fun?
Just for shits and giggles, whatever they call
Yeah.
it. Did I say that correctly?
You did, honey.
Okay, cool. Shits and giggles. The fight and flight, again, it's the program. So you want to look at the program. Why do you need to fight? Why do you need to fly? Flight or escape or anything of that nature. So do the processes that I've talked about, the breathing and accessing those energies, and then able to look at what you are afraid of. You look at what you need to fight and so forth. And get rid of those programs, because they're basically just programs that the ego likes to use to keep you in fight and flight. So do it that way. Write down, why do you need to fight something? Why do you need to flight something? As they come up for you. But use the process of the breathing, the bringing in of the soul, bringing in, activating the highest frequency, and definitely, increasing the oxygen level. What happens is that you're able to use more of the capacities to clear it out. So that's really how you do it. So anytime you feel the fight and flight or danger or anything of that nature, just bring the rest of you, because that's all of this does. By bringing your soul in, activating its soul frequency, increasing your source essence, and the breathing, you're actually bringing all other aspects of yourself. Because if you look at it, the ego will do everything possible to put its focus on itself, because if it has focus on itself, it has a grip on you, then it basically can operate you in a way where you are not using any other of your faculties. You're not using your higher consciousness.
Okay, one more question from Mangosteen Dream. You mentioned that there are more than 65% of extras, people in 2D, in the world.
Mm-hmm.
In what kind of event do they all check out if people of 3D and 5D will be the future, or are they all evolving to 3D? And I just wanted to ask on my from that 65% of 2Ders, are they just strictly ego mind? Like how
They're operated by ego mind.
They're just operated by
ego mind.
ego mind. Okay.
Yeah. So the 65% that are playing. Okay, so is that the last one, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. So the 65% that are the extras, the role players, they are, yes, driven by the ego mind. They don't have an individualized soul or an individualized specific signature human entity. They do have a body. The body is connected to Gaia. They do have a collective human entity connected to it. It's not specific with its own signature, but it is, or individualized, if you want to call it that, an individualized spectrum of that. It's run by the collective. And the same thing with the soul. It doesn't have an individualized soul. It's run by a cluster soul or a collective soul at that point in time. Now, those extras will link to anyone. So if you have an extra that comes into your life, which there are many around, they'll play whatever role is required and beneficial for you as the one that is active in moving forward. So once they've done with the role and they no longer are of service, that 65% or percentage of it, some will choose to unplug, basically check out. Some will just disappear from our reality. Others will become available for specific signature souls to come in and specific human entities to come in. So now they become active through what we call the ascension process, and will go into organic 3D and organic 5D. So are they all the extras going to disappear? No. A percentage of them will. The exact percentage is to be determined depending on how things play out and how things roll out. But some will become active at some point when they are no longer required to play the extras, and others will just leave. And so you'll see a lot of departures and a lot of exchanging going on and so forth. Now, I know one of the questions that come up that I would talk about at some point, there are, there's a list or a long lineup of souls that want to take on physicality, human physicalities. However, they want to take active roles. They're not really souls that want to come in and play 2D inverted 3D for any period of time. They either want to play organic 3D or organic 5D with the intention of organic 5D. The majority will want to come in as organic 5D. So they would not normally take on a 2D physicality unless it became available to be upgraded very quickly. So some of the 2Ds can shift very powerfully, because once they've finished playing the roles for all the other active souls on the planet and active humans at this point in time, then advanced souls and advanced human entities can step in, and then they can shift very powerfully from a 2D to either organic 3D or organic 5D in a short period of time. It will have to deprogram some of the ego stuff and whatever else that's going there, but it's going to be really super fast tracked, but there's a higher level of consciousness. And some of you have already noticed some people that seem like they were totally asleep, all of a sudden they shifted very quickly, where they are really on an active role of deprogramming and accessing higher consciousness. In most cases, those are soul swaps, or they may have been 2D completely, and then a soul dropped in and a human entity dropped in, because their role was ready to be shifted from being an extra to an active participant in the upgrading of the human experience and world. Was there anything else that I needed to cover on that? Did I make it clear enough, or you were too busy trying to look at comments and didn't hear all of it?
I didn't hear everything you were saying because I was doing some other stuff here, but probably honey.
Okay. All right. So hopefully that clarifies the thing. So just as a wrap up, we're moving forward where we're deprogramming. So the inverted matrix is no longer around. The stimulation of 2D and inverted 3D is no longer around. The ego software, artificial intelligence, is something that we are purging within ourselves. The transitioning from using this as a main reference point to bring the rest of you, this is what the embracing is about, is bringing all parts of you. So instead of operating just from an ego perspective, which is pure software that projected this inverted world, the one thing I also wanted to mention is that the inverted 3D basically showed everything opposite, but the 2D was what you call devolving, accessing less and less and less and less of its true essence. And all of us have gone through it at one point or another. If it wasn't in this incarnation, it may have been in others. But at the same time, so we're moving out of this, then this software is becoming more and more obsolete, and we're just basically deprogramming it or turning it off. So be prepared to look at your world, because you have to understand, and please keep this in mind, that most of your reality that exists, that reflects the collective perspective, is very much the ego in the driver's seat. So keep that in mind. So when you're looking at redesigning yourself, don't do it through the ego mind. Do it from that higher perspective of yourself. So do the processes that I've talked about, because that will help you be able to access the tools and necessary components of it to deactivate the ego being in the driver's seat. This is the thing. This is the beauty of it right now, is that the ego world is the fading world, and the true world, true nature of who we are, is coming into the forefront. So we're changing our lives and we're changing our world by bringing in the higher aspects of ourselves to be the creator and co-creation or co-creators engaging and working together. So unless there's something else I need to cover, so I thank everybody for participating, for coming together. I thank you for your support. We'd like to put more of this content out. So if you can support us to upgrade whatever we need, and also to support our journey, because we'd like to focus on this. We're working on a podcast that we're still aiming to launch the following week. So that will be the beginning of June. We're still putting the pieces together. We're still trying to put all the things together, which will, be transmitting. And first of all, it'll be posting on a regular, fairly regular, more regular than what we're doing now. Of course, they're going to be shorter, and they're going to be more focused on various topics. And if we have to break a topic, we will. And that will be available in audio format and also in video format. We are setting up a new YouTube channel, which will be Advancing Consciousness Podcast. And that will have the video version of it, but then the audio version will be available through iTunes and Google Play and whatever else. I think there's quite a few. There's a few of them. So we're just working out the details for that to give you something to really expand and open up what you already know within yourself and go from there. So thank you again, and in the links in the description, the contribution part, there's also a link to take you to the website if you want to become part of the community. That way we'll send you emails time to time to update you on upcoming things. And then we have a link for the different workshops that we've done. And we are putting another workshop together. We're still aiming for 13th, 14th, 15th. It's of June. So it'll be the middle of June, and that will be on deprogramming, clearing, and empowerment, or empowering. Yes, so those three combined. And that will be a workshop that will focus on different techniques, and we'll do various processes to do the deprogramming, the clearing, and also self-empowerment or empowerment. Okay, till next time, which will be Thursday, 4 p.m. Have a blast, and we'll see you then.